Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this webinar. My name is Kurt Wessels. I'm a salesman with Pacific Coast Train, and I'm hosting this webinar today. So thanks to all of you for taking some time to join us. I'm glad you're here. I think you'll find this to be a pretty informative 20 to 30 minutes. Just a few housekeeping items real quick. We're going to keep everybody muted, but you are welcome to send in questions via the chat feature. So if you hover on your screen up there, you'll see the chat option. If you just direct message and send it to me, Kurt Wessels, we'll take those down and we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, and we'll answer as many questions as we can get to. And if we can't get to all of them, we will have the list of questions, and your account manager will get back to you with an answer. So, or if you don't want to submit via chat, feel free to send your account manager an email, or give them a call, whatever, and we'll get any questions answered for you. We're going to also be recording this webinar, so if you want to review it later or pass it along to colleagues who couldn't attend, just let us know, and the recording will be made available. And I think that's it. So, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Dan Briggs. Dan is the co-founder and president of Genesis Air, and Genesis has been providing air sanitization products to the HVAC industry for the past 17 years. He's a graduate of Texas Tech University and has been in the indoor air quality arena for about 2 decades now. So Dan, welcome, and with that, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you everyone for attending.
You have been muted by the moderator. Press star 4 to unmute yourself.
Have I stayed with everyone? I heard somebody say that I've been muted.
You're good, Dan.
Okay. Well, we'll get going. In this changing world of indoor air quality, we now have been presented with a new challenge called COVID-19. And we have legacy technologies that in the past we would have utilized, but we have so many retrofit opportunities, and we have so many challenges that have to be met before our society can get back to normal. But indoor air quality has kind of gone to the forefront. The Genesis Air Train catalytic air cleaning system has been on the market for about 2 decades now. Our association with San Francisco Train is over a decade. We're pleased to be associated with them. And without further ado, we'll start to look at how the product can be deployed in this kind of up in the air situation we find ourselves in. First off, you want to be sure that you're not the first one to use a product. This is just a partial list of some local installations in the Bay Area. And as you can see, a lot of them center around hospitals and at airports. So you will not be the first if you put them in. There are people you can talk to, and we've had a really good track record in your sales area. So let's look at the challenge right now. The challenge is in enclosed public spaces or even private homes, medical, schools, offices, retail, your home, government. How are you going to deal with that little creature in the upper right-hand corner called COVID-19? There are some limitations with legacy technologies. Many of you, your challenge is going to be retrofitting existing systems, and CenterPoint PCO is a really easy solution. We'll go over the reasons for that. But it's hard to use at times legacy technologies because of static pressure drop, particular challenges with the type of contaminant. With a contaminant that's no bigger than 0.06 microns, which according to the New England Medical Journal, this COVID-19 Viron is not very big, 0.06 to 0.14 microns. So filtration, while it's been the answer in the past, may not be the answer in the future. And then you, of course, have the limitations associated with static pressure drop. So one of the ways that we have tried to overcome some of the challenges by the use of oxidative technologies. We're going to talk about oxidative technologies today, how they work, and specifically how CenterPoint PCO works. Let's look at the problem itself. This is a short video. It doesn't have sound, but it shows a person sneezing. And when the person sneezes, we can see a variety of droplet sizes here. The ones that we're most concerned about are not the ones that are falling straight to the surface within 20 inches or the medium range that are falling even further out. The ones we're concerned with are the ones that remain in the form of a cloud at, let's see if I can move this up here. You can see the cloud starting to form of the little bitty droplets. That is a droplet nuclei. And as we see that thing form, you can see how it just sits in the air. Droplet nuclei are less than 5 micron, and they can stay in the air for up to 3 hours. One of the things that we need to be aware of is that with the droplet nuclei, it has its own challenge. It can move through your buildings using your air conditioning systems. It can, of course, move person to person, but we have a challenge now that may not have been fully addressed by the World Health Organization or the CDC. Last week, a paper was published and signed by 239 healthcare and public health officials that said, really, this particular virus, we do not have sufficient safeguards in place to deal with the airborne component. So what we're talking about today is how you deal with airborne particles, i.e. droplet nuclei, that are less than 5 microns. Again, we'll review. The size of COVID-19 is 0.6 to 0.14. That's according to the New England Medical Journal, or Journal of Medicine. Some of this can even go through a medical grade HEPA, but many of you have applications where it's not practical to even put a medical grade HEPA. And the half-life on this particular virus is 2.7 hours in the air. So if it gets in the air and it can stay in the air in the form of a droplet nuclei, and it can move through your building using your HVAC systems, how are you going to deal with this particular problem when we have a virus that really, as far as I've been able to read, we don't even know exactly the minimum infectious dosage, but it's going to be small because that's typical with viruses. It doesn't take as many as it does bacteria or mold. So what's our solution? CenterPoint PCO panels are something for you to consider. Photocatalytic oxidation, or PCO, has been on the market for about 20 years, but all designs are not the same. And we're going to look at a couple of different methods of building a CenterPoint or building a PCO. But one of the things to be aware of is in the past, PCO designs led to the production of things like aldehydes, or they put ozone. There were some real limitations, and they didn't have good first pass efficacy, and that was simply due to the design. CenterPoint PCO has dealt with some of the issues that in the past were a problem with PCO. Simply by placing the energy inside the panel, it irradiates the complete panel, and using a 6-inch pleated matrix, it gives a lot of surface area for the reaction to take place that must take place. But here are the things about CenterPoint PCO. It's a 6-inch TiO2 coated mesh. It uses a proprietary titanium. The design has been patented because it has really good energy distribution and it has a lot of residence time. So some of the problems in the past have been designed away using PCO. So the product sold by San Francisco Train, if it's a retrofit Genesis, or if it's in Trane air handlers, Trane catalytic air cleaners, all take advantage of this unique CenterPoint design. It's been tested. We have third-party tests we'll talk about at the end. Been proven in the field. We've been out in the field now for 18 years. It works. The problem in the past is it was value engineered out of a number of jobs. Some of you may have been involved in jobs that had CenterPoint PCO, but it was value engineered out. We live in a new era though now. It's going to become extremely difficult to value engineer products out that are shown to be effective in limiting risk. And we'll get to how this particular panel fits in with an overall strategy, but be aware the panel is just part of an overall strategy. So with third-party testing, bioaerosols or droplet nuclei were destroyed by the panel up to 98% in a single pass. CenterPoint PCOs are easy to use on new jobs, but here's probably the most important thing. If you're an owner or an engineer, I've been told by the San Francisco Trane people, they have sold over the last couple of decades over 7,000 IPAC units in the Bay Area. This is a panel that can be easily retrofitted into large rooftop units. It does have single pass of efficacy, and the efficacy will vary by the agent that's going through. But the energy from the lamps is from the inside shining out. The location of the reaction, which is very important, it only happens in this panel because what we create in there, a hydroxyl radical, has a half-life of 1/10 or 1/10 to the 9th or 1/10 to the 10th seconds. In other words, less than a billionth of a second. It's not migrating down the ductwork, and we do have third-party testing that confirms the destruction of viral droplet nuclei. So what's the product? It's just a little panel. It looks like a very poorly pleated filter with a light running through the middle, but you can see from the close-up that's not a filter. The reason that it won't pleat is because that fiberglass mesh has enough tensile strength to stand upright in an airstream. And so when you get that and you coat it, it doesn't pleat really pretty, but it gives us a lot of area to react with and a lot of area to energize, which makes for very good first pass efficiency for a PCO. Here's some of the characteristics of a photocatalytic oxidizer. The panel does not capture. As you can see, there are holes in it. It destroys. The reaction occurs only in the panel. It creates a very powerful free radical, which is a whole group of chemicals that are involved in oxidation reduction reaction. The energy that powers this reaction is a germicidal lamp, which means it'll also clean coils if they're shining on them. It can be used in rooftop units, air handling units, duct mounted, standalone. You can use it. I have one in my house. So you can go from where we're looking at doing right now, the largest unit we've ever done is 360,000 CFM. The smallest would be something that was 12 by 12 on a little fan coil unit. But because of the static pressure drop, this is real easy to deploy. But remember, retrofit solutions is what CenterPoint PCO specializes in because it's designed to be easy to retrofit. So you can get it in new systems from Trane, you can get it factory installed, you can retrofit RTUs, DX splits, AHUs, and we also have units that have their own blowers that will just recirculate in the space. Let's look at a couple of examples. On the left is San Francisco Airport, which has one of the finest track records for indoor air quality with their new facilities of anywhere in the United States. Since they deployed these panels 8 years ago, whether it was the primary purpose was to deal with exhaust fumes, but the secondary benefit, these panels have also kept the airport relatively free from bioaerosols and droplet nuclei. So SFO can say they were one of the few facilities, at least in Terminal 2, that was prepared for what's happened with COVID-19. So heads up, SFO is a good place to go if you've got to fly. This is a factory install. This is a Trane M-Series unit. So you can get this now in their performance climate changers or their Fort Smith product OEM factory. It's a really good option. It's easy to install. The advantages for the product, in particular in a retrofit, is the static pressure drop is 0.05 at 500 feet per minute. It's really easy to service. You just change out these UV lamps, but you can see the little green ends here. You undo a couple of screws, and the lights slide in, and the lights slide out, and the lights slide in. This is a front-mounted application. This is a side mount where the panels just pull out the side. This one, you take the panels, and on that rack, you pull them towards the servicing person where you expose this service in, which is right here. Once again, you can see the lights running completely through the middle of the panel. So on a front load application, 13 inches, side load application, 6 inches, lower energy requirement. You can lower your outdoor air. We've done a number of jobs using IAQ procedure. We've been in business long enough to have those actually in the field numbers. It's sustainable. The panel itself will last for 15 years, continuous usage. In a school setting, actually the panels will last between 35 and 40 years with normal school use. It's self-cleaning. When the UV lights come on, they keep the panel clean, and they'll also keep coils clean if they're shining on your coil. Design considerations: we'd prefer to be downstream of your evap coil in your saturated zone so the UV lamps could keep everything on that coil clean on the leaving edge. Does have to have upstream filtration. It's kind of like your evap coil. You don't want to turn our panels into a filter. They're not designed for that. Airspeed is 500 feet per minute or lower. All of our third-party testing was done at 500 feet per minute. Again, review. It takes 6 inches for a side load rack, takes 13 inches for a front load rack, and the power usage, all of the panels are 120 volts. They use 0.05 kW per square foot, but that is across the duct half section, or the duct section. So it's not 23,000 square foot space. It's actually a 4x4 or whatever the duct is, so it's the duct cross section. All right, how does the panel work? Very simply, it's an oxidation reduction reaction. In a presentation such as today, we won't go into all the chemistry, but suffice it to say it creates a free radical, which is the same kind of thing that ozone or hydrogen peroxide is. There are a whole list of those that we'll look at in a minute. How does it work? When we create the free radical in the panel, we destroy the DNA and RNA of things like virus, bacteria, and mold spores on the fly. We break down hydrocarbon chains, odor control. In fact, most of the work that we've done in the Bay Area was odor control to deal with heliports associated with hospitals or emergency generators, or in places like the airport, exhaust fumes off of aircraft. We've also done a hospital or two that were involved with reducing the odors from the forest fires. And that's actually a really good application for the product as well. But this oxidation reduction reaction is not something new. It occurs naturally everywhere all the time. The reason I say that, the sun's shining on some part of the planet all the time, and in the troposphere 7 miles up, the reaction that we have occurring in the panel occurs in the troposphere. OH, or hydroxyl radicals, are created naturally using the UV light from the sun. It creates that hydroxyl radical, and as you can see by the quote, that's responsible for things like clearing up carbon monoxide and other carbon-based molecules like methane. So all we're doing is something that's natural. What's the benefit? The benefit is when you turn that power on, that $1 or 50 cents or whatever you're paying for power at that particular moment, we're going to break the droplet nuclei down, which gives you a certain measure of safety with an airborne virus that has been shown to pass from one person to another through the air. You also will break down hydrocarbon chains so you can deal with odors in your structure, and you can keep your evap coils clean if you position this panel where it shines on your evap coil. So the picture of the hydrogen peroxide bubbling up on a cut gives you an idea of what's happening microscopically in this panel when we create the free radical field. Our challenge is to deal with the RNA of a virus that's smaller than 5 microns, and actually it's 0.06 to 0.14. And our goal is to break down the RNA, DNA, this particular virus, it's the RNA. So one of the things we want to do is make sure that we have efficacy with an airborne component. Why an airborne component? Why is that our challenge? Because we're only part of a comprehensive infection control plan. We definitely say you have to follow the CDC or World Health guidelines, do your social distancing, wash your hands, clean your surfaces, do all the things that the public health officials recommend you do, but there's a hole in their recommendations. They truly don't have a method to deal with droplet nuclei, and that's where we fit in. We fill that gap that's associated with moving air in a space. Now, the gap in this particular case, in this slide, means Genesis air process, and that's a trademark. But for infection control, remember, there is a gap in the guidelines, and healthcare professionals have gone to the point to have written a peer review article that was released last week, and 239 of them signed it. That says basically we have to start doing something with the air quality inside of our buildings more than we've done in the past. That's where CenterPoint PCO comes in. On the left, and you can get a copy of the video, Trane has a really cool video that shows the Trane catalytic air cleaner here on the right as it operates and contaminant comes through, so you can get an idea of how it works in an HVAC system. Let's redefine just briefly our challenge. It's these droplet nuclei that are less than 5 microns that will migrate more than 10 meters and can stay in the air for up to 3 hours. And they can stay alive, according to National Institute of Health, for up to 2.7 hours. There's also an ASHRAE position paper on infectious diseases. It's been renewed through 2020, I think August of this year. So if capture is not assured, and you've got AHUs moving pathogens, how are you going to render the space a little bit safer from the challenge of COVID-19? I think we're offering up a way that you can do that. There are a number of free radical creating technologies in the market. All of you as owners or engineers have been bombarded by people like myself who are vendors offering you technologies that are not legacy technologies. In other words, they don't capture. They use oxidizing agents to destroy. I think there are 3 main categories that we should look at. Catalytic converters on your car are an example of a free radical creating technology that everyone's familiar with. There are now, the market is full of ionizers, and those ionizers also create free radicals. And then finally, there are things like photocatalyst, and in our instance, it's a CenterPoint photocatalyst. All of these technologies, what they have in common is they generate free radicals, and they use an oxidation reduction reaction to break down the contaminants in the air, whether it's RNA or it's hydrocarbon chains. Either way, it's an oxidation reduction reaction, and all of the agents that do that reaction fall under the heading of free radicals. So how are the products different? They all create free radicals. Well, they can have a different energy source, the catalytic converter, the ionizer, or the PCO. The location of the reaction can be different, and the type of free radical created can be different. So one of the things to consider, none of you are probably going to buy a catalytic converter and put it in your office because it requires heat, cause the reaction to occur. Ionizers and PCO, though, both use energy. Ions themselves are the energy. CenterPoint PCO uses the photons from a UV lamp, but at the end, both of these technologies create free radicals. The difference in them is, it's a difference between a bug zapper and a fogger in your backyard. If you have mosquitoes and you want people to go out in your backyard and sit and relax, or your children to play, You can either take a bug zapper and bring the bugs to where you want them and kill them there, or you can fog the whole yard and kill everything in the backyard. The problem is you're in the backyard. So while ionizers may work, you probably don't want to be in the space where they're working. So remember the analogy. The bug zapper is CenterPoint PCO. An ionizer is mostly like a fogger in your backyard, continuously running. What are they doing? They're both creating free radicals. Free radicals are something that happens all the time. It's how we process nutrients. One of the things about our bodies, if we create an oxidizing agent, our bodies have to have an antioxidant to counteract it. So you want to be careful when you're doing something that creates free radicals. Are you upsetting that balance between oxidants and antioxidants in a human body? So when you see the things that are in the chart on the right, and you can get a copy of this from your train group, remember any technology that creates any of the things on this chart is creating a free radical, and free radicals can interact with the molecules in your body, and they've been associated with a variety of damage to cell components. And so let's just look at some of these technologies a little closer. Catalytic converters use the heat from the engine. You can see the dirty air going in from the left. The reaction itself takes place in those little yellow half circles, and the clean air goes out on the right. Well, what's the energy? The energy is the heat from the engine. This is a thermal oxidizer. Where does the free radical get created? Where does the reaction occur? Right there in those little half sections inside the panel itself. Does it have single pass efficacy? Yes, the EPA insists that all these things be monitored, and they have to have a minimum removal capacity in a single pass. So what are we looking at next? We're not going to put a we're not going to put a catalytic converter in our office. We might put an ionizer. Ionizers will work, but a word of warning. In the new 2019 ASHRAE handbook, be aware in hospital applications in particular, ionizers or chemical fogging and mist are not recommended in occupied spaces. Why? If I provide the energy in the form of an ion out into this space, I flood the space with ions. And I say that I will clean a mold spore right here next to this gentleman's elbow. He is breathing in exactly the same energy that was used to kill the mold spore here to start the same reaction in his lungs. So be aware, ionizers are a good technology if it's not an occupied space. If it's an occupied space, anything that creates a free radical, you want to be careful where you're having that create, because free radicals cannot differentiate between a virus and a cell in your lung. If the reaction is taking place, it's taking place. Single pass efficacy, you can see this is an uncontrolled environment and the reaction can occur anywhere in the space. So it has very little single pass efficacy. The location of the reaction can be anywhere in the space, but we do know that the ionizer is providing the fuel that starts the fire. Remember, the heat off the engine in the catalytic converter was the fuel that starts the fire. Now let's look at the difference of CenterPoint PCO. CenterPoint PCO is different from some of the other PCOs that were on the market. When they were introduced 20 years ago, in fact, research was done in the Bay Area and found out that the honeycomb product that was being used at that time would have a tendency to produce aldehydes. That had strictly to do with how the energy was distributed and was there a hydroxyl field all the way across the panel. When you engineered and met those challenges, then PCO became much more user-friendly. This panel, in fact, has been tested and shows that with the office mix recommended to use by Lawrence Berkeley Labs, it does not produce aldehydes. And by the way, we are a Train source product, and frankly, Train has more attorneys than we have employees. And so we've been thoroughly vetted, I think is the point of this. CenterPoint PCO has some unique designs things, but primarily it's the location of the energy and it's the amount of media that's in the airstream. so we can get a lot of hydroxyls out there to power the reactions. So we have CenterPoint PCO. It's a 6-inch panel. All these panels, by the way, I don't know if I've said so. Like if you're going to put them in an IPAC 1-2, we already have that pre-designed. We know where they go and how you can utilize them. Your trained guys can help you, but remember, this panel is never wider than 6 inches, and it goes across the airstream, so there are 194 UL variations, and these panels also all have OSHPD approval. So let me go back to, this is the original design of PCOs, a honeycomb with the light 4 inches away, shining onto it. As you can see, there's shadowing. Wherever you see the dark spots or the shadowing, there's no energy exchange. So basically you have a whole bunch of little tunnels stacked on each other, and depending on where the lamp is located, if the lamp is directly behind the tunnel, you can see it, you get really good energy distribution. If it's away from the center line, you can see the shadowing. That does not happen in CenterPoint, because with CenterPoint, the energy is embedded in the lamp and it irradiates from the inside out, not the outside onto it. All right, so let's go to our concluding statements. CenterPoint PCO, we have even energy distribution. The lights, the photons from those lamps provide the energy that does the reaction. Static pressure drop 0.05 at 500 feet per minute. 6-inch width, can be front loaded, side loaded, can be in new units, can be retrofit, has a measurable single pass efficacy, and it's going to vary by the agents, but the reaction location is always going to be in the panel because that reaction occurs in less than a billionth of a second, so it won't migrate out into the space. And the media itself is pleated the way it is, so at 500 feet per minute, the effective number of feet per minute across the panel is less than 70. So we've got good residence time, even energy, and occupant safety. Has it been tested? We're going to close with this. Yes, the panels have definitely been tested by the Department of Defense at Dugway, Utah, by Iowa State University, and by the way, Dugway was testing to see if we could sanitize the air, so we got like a 98% removal. Iowa State wanted to see if we could sanitize. No, they wanted to see if we could sterilize. So if you slowed the airspeed down, a virus they tested, we can actually sterilize the air, so that's a design feature. Research Triangle Institute did the same testing that Dugway did as a confirming test. We've had new testing done at LMS Technologies within the last 2 months to make sure that the panels are still performing as they were over a decade and a half ago, and we're actually doing a bit better. National Health Safety Net, which is associated with Center for Medicaid, Medicare, Medicaid, for the last 5 years has released the numbers of MRSA incidents in hospitals nationally, and we have been able to chart with these public figures hospitals that have the Genesis panels or the TCAC product have a 20% lower than the national average or expected rate of MRSA. So we have a proven track record in hospitals. We've been tested by the Department of Defense, by universities, by internationally recognized testing agencies, and we've done new testing. So let's review the challenge. The challenge is, what are we going to do to protect ourselves with an airborne challenge? Airborne challenges require airborne solutions, and airborne solutions require educated owners, educated engineers, and educated vendors to understand the risk, to see if the product we're recommending meets the challenge, and if so, how we can implement it. And that's where your people at Train San Francisco can help you out. They're the experts in getting this product into the field to both your end users and to the people in those structures. Any questions?
Hey, Dan. Yeah, one question maybe that we didn't quite address. Can you give us an idea of the energy requirement
Yeah, if you get a copy of the slides, it's on about the second or third slide, and I didn't do a very good job of going over that. But the energy requirement is 0.05 kW per square foot across the duct half section or the duct section. I keep bungling that, but did that make sense? If you've got a 2x2 duct, then it's 0.05 kW times 4. Anything else?
Couple quick questions just on safety. Disabling the UV lights before you enter, what's typical for that?
All right, we have door switches, and then also in the owners and installation manuals, we have guidelines for your service personnel, but the precautions should be the same as they would be for any germicidal UV lamp. You don't want to look at it and stare at it, and you want to protect your skin.
Okay. You mentioned briefly about ozone and the ozone isn't produced and formaldehyde is not produced. Can you just clarify a little bit on the ozone? How come that isn't the case since UV lights are sometimes noted for producing at least small levels of ozone?
We'd be happy to present to either engineer or owner a certified letter from our lamp company. We don't make the lamps, but every lamp is bench tested to see if it produces ozone. The reason we don't is the type of quartz that the lamps are made out of. We've had the lamps tested by CARB out in California, and we're CARB certified. But every lamp, we can get you a letter if you need it from the manufacturer. They're all bench tested. And so while inside the tube, we may have ozone, but by the quartz that we're using, it changes the wavelength, and as it irradiates out, we have the energy we need to start the reaction in our catalyst, but we are not producing ozone, and we'll give you a test for that. The other thing about aldehydes, the production of aldehydes has to do with older designs of PCOs that did not have good energy distribution and don't have a good cross-section that is energized equally across the board. Our product does. So those products sold by San Francisco Train, both the Train catalytic air cleaner and the Genesis Air retrofit panel, have been tested and do not produce ozones using the don't produce aldehydes using the methodology that was initiated by Lawrence Berkeley Labs years and years ago. What else, Kurt?
Just related to that question on the quote unquote CenterPoint trademark and that relates in there. Can you just briefly reiterate the CenterPoint aspect of the design?
CenterPoint has to do, if the slide is back up, CenterPoint has to do with the location of the energy. Because it's inside the panel irradiating out, at the end of the 12,000 hours, which is the maintenance cycle on the lamp, we still have enough energy being produced to irradiate and activate all the way to the edge of that mesh. So where the lamp is located has to do with why it's called CenterPoint. In other words, we don't have the energy from the outside of the panel shining onto it because the energy is going to withdraw over time towards the center line of the lamp. So actually, if a lamp says it has an 8,000 hour lamp life, now is that at what point from the center line of the lamp? We know at 12,000 hours, our lamps still produce enough energy to irradiate and activate the outer edges of our panel. So center point has to do with where the energy is located. The other main feature is with the pleats. It's like taking let's say we had a 10 by 20 foot air handler and we just had a single sheet in front of it at 500 feet per minute. Well, you're not getting very much residence time, but if you take and you pleat that cross section on 1 inch centers with 6 inch pleats, you really increase that residence time. So that's really the advantages of CenterPoint. It's the location of the energy, and it's the amount of media that is being irradiated, which in turn affects the amount of free radicals we create. So we get a lot better first pass efficiency. But that's just a design issue. What else you got, Kurt?
This has come up a couple times. Maybe just reiterate. We have UV lights in the product, but we're not a UV-GI system. Just real quickly, what's the difference between PCO and UV-GI?
The media. The lights we have would be more powerful than the ones you would buy to keep your coils clean, but they're also germicidal, so they're doing exactly the same thing. But we're also taking advantage of the energy off that photon to activate those things that look like white paint on that pleated matrix. That white color is titanium dioxide, and when it gets energized, it creates those free radicals. Anything else?
I think we've used up about all our time now. Those are some great questions. So I think we're going to go at this point, but just to wrap things up, again, thank you all for attending. I do have some questions that were sent, some good questions that were rather lengthy discussions. So please contact if we didn't get your question, we have a copy here, but we may not have your contact if you're just a name or a phone number. So please email your train account manager and send them those questions so that we know who you are and can get back to you with answers, and which we're happy to do. So look forward to it. It's a great, it's a very good product. We've had good success with it here, and so again, thank you for everyone for your time and attendance and questions. And please reach out to us with further questions or new questions, and we'll be happy to answer those. And Dan, thank you for your excellent presentation. And I think we'll leave it at that. So once again, thank you everybody, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you.